On this episode of Brewed in New York, the New York City boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens were once at the heart of America's brewing industry. So we're visiting a trio of breweries that are putting them front and center again. Stay right here.
Discover even more local foods and beverages at Taste New York locations throughout the state. Whether you're at a state park, sporting event, or stopping at one of our New York welcome centers, it's never been easier to choose local and buy New York. Unilam, a family-owned business in upstate New York serving the building industry for over a century. You can spot Unilam's finely crafted timber products in breweries throughout New York State and beyond. Learn more at unilam.com. 1886 Malt House, proudly partnering with New York's finest grain growers to produce locally sourced, high-quality malt for farm and craft breweries. The Northeast Hop Alliance, farmers, brewers, and educators working together to provide high-quality, locally grown hops to craft beer consumers in New York and the Northeast.
Old New York has been a city in love with beer since it was called New Amsterdam.
The Dutch brought beer to the city centuries ago, and pub life went hand in hand with business, politics, and family.
German immigrants brought the gift of lagering to the Big Apple. At the turn of the 20th century, New York City was one of the largest centers of beer production in the country. There were over 45 breweries in the borough of Brooklyn alone, with 11 in just one 12-block stretch of Williamsburg.
The city never really got on board with Prohibition. The mayor at the time, Alfred E. Smith, believed it was an unenforceable law, and he was proved right as New York City became an epicenter for speakeasies, gangsterism, and violence. Smith ran against the 18th Amendment when he became the Democratic nominee for president in 1928, and famously drank a beer on the day the amendment was repealed.
Beer production never reached its pre-Prohibition levels after repeal, and nearly went flat altogether. In the 70s, New York was facing bankruptcy, and many parts of the city were locked in the grip of urban decay.
But that began to change in the 80s as community organizers and some plucky business owners began to reinvest in their neighborhoods. As it turns out, some of them happened to be brewers.
Today, Brooklyn is back, and in this episode, we're visiting 3 breweries in the area that are helping strengthen its culture and economy. First up, Threes Brewing.
Depending on who you ask, Threes means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For some, we're a brewery, and you can come get really tasty, fresh craft beer. We've got a coffee shop that opens at 7 a.m. every day, so some people just park there with their laptops doing work all day. We've got a food partner called the Meat Hook, who's a renowned butcher that's headquartered in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, that opens up as a restaurant here, so there are some people that just come in for the food. We do live performances here 5-6 nights a week with music, comedy, you name it. There's always something going on at Threes. At our best, it's a little bit of chaos theory here, and it's this beautiful cacophony of stuff, and it all kind of clicks. We opened the company in Brooklyn because Brooklyn's home. I've always wanted to have a community space in the neighborhood I lived in and a place that my kids would grow up in. This particular neighborhood in Gowanus is zoned for manufacturing, which is something that's really important in our business. You hear politicians and communities talk about bringing manufacturing jobs back to the city, and in many ways we're the poster child for that. We're a little over 3 years old, and year 1 we did just shy of 1,000 barrels. We passed about 90% of that over the brew pub here. Year 2, we did just shy of 2,000 barrels, and then year 3, we just finished up at about 2,700 barrels. So it's been pretty good linear growth, and we expect to continue that in the foreseeable future. The brew team is empowered to make whatever they want to make. The guys are always trying to find that line between simplicity and complexity. So if you're the kind of person who wants to stick your nose in your beer and find all the different flavor profiles, we believe our beer lends itself very well to that. If you just want to crush some beers on the beach with your friends, our beer lends itself well to that too. And so it's really what you're looking to get out of it. And we think beer is very context dependent. So that's why we make so many.
It's great to be a part of the vibrant Brooklyn scene. I like that the beer community here is excited about our beer. I don't feel any need to like satisfy any cult of the new thing, but it's energizing. It forces me to push the boundaries of what we do. I'm inspired by balance and creating a product that can bring people together. And I think beer is just a conduit to like good conversation. Our flagship is our Pilsner Velite, which I am drinking right now. It is my favorite beer that we make. It's a classic German-style Pilsner, definitely a little heavier hops. It uses some really nice Czech varieties and German varieties with German malt, traditional ingredients, traditional yeast. To me, I could, bring anybody into our space, I think, and give them a Velite and they'll enjoy it. I bank a lot on our Pilsner, and there is a Pilsner revolution happening right now, so it's not a crazy concept. To me, with Pils, it's about trying to convince people of the utility of subtlety. You have to have the right grain in there. You have to have the right yeast, right fermentation. The water is really important. It's also expensive to brew. Pilsner, it's about 4 weeks to make, 4 to 6 weeks, and IPA is about 2 weeks. So we're holding those things in tanks for longer, but for me, it's worth it. We still have IPAs on, and we're always gonna make those, but we wanna have a well-balanced portfolio. With our beer list, we put friends' beers on tap, and those beers inspire us, and I like drinking those beers. It allows us to focus on what we like to focus on, and then give people options when they come to our space.
We didn't want to fall in the traditional brew pub trap of having to make an amber ale, a blonde ale, and a brown ale. And really the guys are going to make what they're inspired to make. And as such, we can round out the portfolio with other beer that we kind of internally think about as being made by friends and heroes. So a lot of them are local breweries that we've become friends with that are making some incredible beer.
We have wine, we have cider, we also have cocktails and a full bar. We want people to come here and experience just a community. Our space is really about more than just the brewery. The brewery is just a creative, energizing force to the rest of the space.
Threes is almost a case study in collaboration in many respects. So we've got a coffee partner, they're their own business, but it's seamless to the customer. We've got a food partner that's seamless to the end customer, but we work together on the floor every day, day in, day out. The grain that is the byproduct of making beer is a food product, and the meat hook turns it into their veggie burger, which is pretty cool. We've also done a bunch of collaborations around different causes. We believe that it is incumbent upon us as members of our community to take part and have a voice in things we believe in. We did a beer last year called Gender Neutral. That was a beer that we partnered with the Human Rights Campaign. More recently, we did a beer called Courage, My Love, and donated 10% of the proceeds to the American Civil Liberties Union. We also typically do an event here at the brewery and try to really just get some awareness out for the cause itself.
Right now, the market in Brooklyn is definitely competitive. We're just gonna continue to do things our own way, and I feel very confident in that working.
Right now, we're really pleased with where Threes is at. We are an important part of a lot of people's lives, both from the people who work here as well as our patrons. We definitely have what is a really emerging fan base, and beer is one of those things that people do get fanatical about, much like they do about their local sports teams. In the next few years, we'd like to continue to just find our voice creatively, continuing to put out great beer, as well as really participate in events in the world around us, both in our community and more broadly. We don't aspire to be a huge company, which I know may be pretty unusual in today's day and age of grow, grow, grow. We want to be big enough that we can support our families and make sure that we still have fun and don't sell our souls in the process. One of my favorite nights at Threes was when there was a woman in the neighborhood who wrote a book, and she did her book release here. That was in the upstairs area. In the main bar, we had a beer release, and there was a Grateful Dead DJ and a whole bunch of people here to see that person. And then there was a whole crew with a private party that was here for the Meat Hook food. And these were these disparate groups, and they all kind of wound up in the common area together. And I saw people just started talking, and what are you here for? What are you here for? And for us, that was really what the project was about this sense of community and creating kind of a clubhouse in our neighborhood.
Craft 101. Yeast, it's alive!
Not knowing how yeast works its magic didn't stop humans from figuring out how to make alcohol a long time ago. In fact, analysis of ancient pottery discovered in China has revealed that people were enjoying an alcoholic beverage made with rice, honey, and fruit as early as 7000 BC. A few thousand years ago, our ancestors figured out that if they soaked some grain in hot water, let it cool, and then left it to age in a mostly closed container, they got beer. They didn't know how. Some attributed it to divine intervention. But whatever was responsible, they were thankful. It wasn't until the 17th century that chemists started using magnifying lenses to observe fermentation and became aware of the role of yeast in the brewing process. And in the mid-1800s, it was Louis Pasteur who finally realized that yeast was alive and hungry. So what's going on here? Yeast is a single-cell organism found almost everywhere in nature. It's in the air and on most solid surfaces, even on our skin. There are over 1,500 unique strains of yeast with all sorts of funky, hard-to-pronounce names. But every strain has one focus: multiply. They need energy to do this, so they eat sugar. And when living organisms eat, they all create some sort of waste. Fortunately for us, in yeast's case, this waste comes in the form of alcohol and CO2. In the beginning, brewers would expose their beer into the open air where it would come in contact with natural yeast. Because these wild yeast strains vary by region, many beers developed their own unique flavor based on where they were brewed. This contributes to what you'll hear referred to as terroir. When beer production was industrialized in the 18th and 19th century, brewers learned how to cultivate specific yeast strains and introduce them in a closed environment in order to create more consistency in their recipes. However, with the newfound popularity of craft beer, some breweries have once again started experimenting with open fermentation to resurrect wild beers, sours, and lambics. Everything old is new again. I'm standing here in Long Island City in West Queens. It's just north of Brooklyn, over the East River from Manhattan. It's an up-and-coming neighborhood with a diverse artistic community, and it's chock full of museums, waterfront parks, and probably the best and most exciting beer scene in the entire city. It's also the home of my favorite place to spend a Saturday, LIC Beer Project. LIC calls itself a collaborative journey and is the brainchild of two homebrewers turned pro, Dan Acosta and Damon Oscarson.
I met Dan about 3 years ago. We were hanging out actually at a homebrew meeting. We both wanted to open a brewery and get into the beer industry. And we got to talking about what beers were offered in New York, and we realized that we had the same interest in Belgian-inspired beers, wild ales, and we wanted to bring something like that to New York City because it really wasn't offered here. We have a 20-barrel brew house. We brew about 3,000 barrels a year. We sell in all 5 boroughs in New York City, and we also send beer all the way up the Hudson Valley to Albany and also throughout Long Island.
Long before opening the doors at LIC, partner Dan Acosta first took an interest in Belgian-style beers on a European backpacking trip in 2004. How did you get from being a home brewer to here?
I knew that homebrewing was only going to get me to a certain point, so I enrolled at the Siebel Institute of Technology in Chicago.
Brewing school.
Correct.
Yeah.
I returned back to Europe, where I continued my education in brewing science, and that really catapulted my brewing knowledge and allowed me to really get deep into these styles.
The sours and saisons I've had that you've brewed here have been phenomenal. Some of them are right on style, and they're stuff I recognize from Belgium, and then there's kind of different takes on them too.
So we wanted to really pay homage to some of the traditional style Belgian farmhouse beers, but at the same time we wanted to stray a little bit from that and take our own interpretation on the beers.
For people who are not familiar with a farmhouse ale, what makes a farmhouse ale?
Traditionally in Belgium and France, farmhouse ales were brewed for farm workers. Very simple beers that were brewed with the ingredients that was indigenous to the property that the farmers worked on. Mm-hmm. Typically they are mixed fermentation, so Brettanomyces, bacteria were used to brew the beers.
So that means it's not just brewer's yeast, there's just stuff coming from the air into the beer.
Correct, they would just allow the natural microbes that were in the air to ferment the beer.
One of the things I'm really excited about with LIC Beer Project is the coolship that you have here. I think probably a lot of people don't know what a coolship is. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure, so our coolship is a traditional open fermentation vessel that allows all the natural yeast and bacteria that naturally occurs in the air to spontaneously ferment the beer, to inoculate the beer.
That's unusual, right?
It is, it's quite unusual. We're the first brewery in New York City to be doing this style of fermentation.
Yeah, I mean very few even breweries in the whole country probably do this.
There are a handful of breweries in the country, yeah.
Right. What yeast makes it into this beer?
There are several yeasts. There's over 25 different yeast strands in this beer. From wild Saccharomyces yeast to Brettanomyces to Lactobacillus, which was a bacteria, Pediococcus, which is also a bacteria.
It's a lot of bacteria. How do you know it's safe to drink?
So a lot of these yeast and bacteria that we use in this beer naturally occur on fruits, specifically figs. So we found during the R&D period, before we actually started brewing the coolship beers, that there was a large population of fig trees in this area.
So this is specifically a Long Island City beer. We're not catching any of that New York City smog.
Correct.
That's good. Could you talk me through this a little? I'd love to taste it.
So this is the first beer in our spontaneous program. So this specific beer was fermented in Chardonnay barrels.
Wow.
So on this beer, you'll get a nice oak quality, a little grape character.
Yeah, that Chardonnay is coming through in the nose. It's so pleasantly sour. And it's balanced out. It's not sweetness in there, but there's something balancing out the sour.
So the oak gives a perceived sweetness, and it really helps carry the beer into the finish. The beer drinks very long.
I mean, wine drinkers would love this too,
Correct.
especially someone who likes natural wines.
Correct.
What advice do you have for home brewers who want to open their own brewery? I mean, it took you 8 years to go from home brew to a brewery.
Making beer is fun and it's one thing, but running a business is a completely different animal. I went back to school for 2 years to get a degree in business administration, so I can understand how to run a business.
Yeah.
We have employees, we have people that rely on us for their families, so it's important to make sure you have a really well-developed structure within the business.
The first time you got a beer in your hometown bar of choice, was that like hearing your song on the radio for the first time?
It was quite surreal.
Was it?
To see your tap handle there and see it become real.
Yeah.
Your vision and dream to actually become real and to share it with, friends and family and the people that are close to you is super important.
Well, I'm a big fan of your beer, and I love coming to the tap room here in LIC, and I really appreciate the time you spent here today with me.
Cheers, I'm humbled. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
We could hardly do a series about craft beer without including Brooklyn Brewery. Now over 30 years old, it's one of the oldest craft breweries in New York State. Founded in 1988 by war correspondent turned home brewer Steve Hindy, Brooklyn has been a leader in raising the profile of American beers worldwide. And it's been credited as a key player in attracting and supporting the creative newcomers that call Brooklyn home. We could talk about a lot of things when it comes to Brooklyn Brewery, but I opted to sit down for a one-on-one conversation with brewmaster Garrett Oliver. Oliver's been Brooklyn's brewmaster since 1994, and his personal taste has been one of the driving forces behind the success of the brand. His 2003 book, The Brewmasters Table, is considered a standard for beer lovers, and he was one of the editors of the Oxford Companion to Beer. So it's safe to say he's got some street cred in the industry. I'm going to paraphrase you here. You said being a craft brewer is a life diverted. What does that mean?
That means that I was supposed to be doing what you're doing. I went to film school. I graduated with a degree in film, but I was also falling in love with beer at the same time. In college, I had nothing but mass market yellow fizzy beer with no flavor. But then I moved to England, and I got this stuff that they put in this big jar and gave to me, and it was kind of warm and kind of flat. And I was like, I'm not sure I like this. Better have another one to find out. And really fell in love with that. When I got back, I started making my own. Almost none of us went to school and said, you know what I'm gonna be in the future? I'm gonna be a craft brewer. These days, that's starting to happen. But back in the day, that was not the case. You said you wanted to become a brewer, people just thought there was something wrong with you. And there probably was.
Well, I mean, you've taken it to the extreme because you are actually this legendary brewmaster. You've written books on beer. These are very popular books.
Well, legendary, I think, I'm starting to realize means old. But I'm totally cool with that. I've been traveling around the world for more than 20 years as an American brewer. And it used to be that you would show up and you'd say, hi, I'm a brewer from the United States. And they would say, oh yes, we have heard of your American beer. So sorry. They showed no respect whatsoever. These days, it's completely the opposite. What's going on in the United States with craft beer is pretty much the light of the world when it comes to creativity, expression, and growth. Anywhere you go, you're going to see American IPA or American style this or American style that. And it kind of shows you a little bit of the power and pushiness in a way of being an American in the world. So we try to be good ambassadors in that way. Our overseas business has grown really organically. We've really only gone to places that we want to go and done business with people that we like. And that's worked out really well. People don't know this, but the #2 market for Brooklyn Brewery is Sweden. We have a partner brewery in Stockholm. When I go into local shops, people say, hey, how's it going? How's the brewery doing? We don't put beer on a boat and send it to strangers. Everybody who's at the other end, they know us. And for me, that's really cool.
You've lived in Brooklyn for a while. I'm sure you've seen it change. Has that change influenced your beer or vice versa?
It's been fascinating. I think that Brooklyn was always cool, but people didn't always know it. When I moved here to actually work for Brooklyn Brewery in '94, it was a bit tough around here. I mean, when you walk to the subway, it's a 5-minute walk to the subway, and if you saw anybody on the street during that 5 minutes, you would cross the street to the other side, because there was nobody outside looking to do you any good after dark. It's so completely different these days. I think that we're really influenced by all the stuff going on around us, all the creativity, all the people making clothes and great food and music and all sorts of things. And so we want our beer to reflect where we're from and this place, which is a creative place that doesn't sit still. Brooklyn Brewery is a creative brewery that doesn't sit still.
When tourists come in, and if you were to give them a flight of beer from Brooklyn Brewery, what would you have in the flight for them?
Oh, well, there's about 14 beers up at the bar right now. We'd probably start right now with Summer Ale, which is kind of like lighter, brighter, but still full of flavor. Brooklyn Lager, especially if they haven't had it, it's our flagship beer, and still about half of what we make, overall. And then we range all the way up into things that have barrel aging, fruit infusions, IPAs of various types, starting at a really light end at 4.5%, all the way up to 8.2% with big hop characteristics. We have darker beers, which become more popular in the cooler months. Brooklyn Brown Ale, which is popular year-round.
How has your personal palate influenced the beer here?
Well, my personal palate basically is the beer here. So what craft beer is to me is very simple. Craft beer is beer that is a product of an individual vision, not from a focus group, not from some sort of corporate body saying we need to have X, but a person. And here, that person is me. So I'm thinking about, like, what do I want to taste? What have we not done? What situation would we like our beer to be able to be in that it can't be in that well right now? So if I said we didn't have a beer that's really great with a salad, or great at the beach, or great on the roof, or great at a high-end restaurant, then that kind of goes into what we're going to end up doing. But I think that the important thing is the fact that we are so much more craft than we've ever been before. We do so much more handwork. We have 2,000 oak barrels that are full. Every single one of those filled, emptied, handled by hand. Re-fermentation in the bottle like champagne. We're working with local winemakers. We're using their natural yeast strains that are at the bottoms of their fermentations to spur further fermentations and make interesting, funky beers. What really interests me, brewing-wise, is stuff that becomes more and more localized. Our guys go out into the farmers market every week. We talk to producers, we see what's in the market, we see what berries and fruits and whatever else are out there, and we'll buy it same day, bring it back here, and it will end up in a barrel and later become a beer.
Well, I will tell you that many people, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, are very happy that your life was diverted into brewing beer. So
I would have been a great filmmaker, I would have been Scorsese.
Well, we're thankful that you chose beer, and thank you for inviting us in.
No, well, thanks very much. It's great. I'm loving it. Can you tell?
If you're planning on trying out beer tourism in New York, there are plenty of great public transportation options for your next brewery tour. Investigate and plan ahead so you can enjoy responsibly. Please remember, you should never drink and drive.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Brewed in New York. Just a reminder, there are over 400 breweries across New York State to explore.
Check out our website at brewednewyorkshow.com to learn more. The possibilities are almost limitless.
Until next time, thanks for watching.